But let's begin with the kinds of issues that you might have encountered in the scenarios and in your own writing of your dilemmas. And basically, I like to break it down into four issues. First one would be a competency issue. Second one would be a temptation. Third one would be a dilemma. And the fourth one would be systematic. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, ethics has to do with the question, what should you do? Now, not all what should you do questions have to do with ethics. Some have to do with just getting some things done. Doctors ask, what should you do? Heart patients ask, what should you do? Mechanics ask, what should you do? So there's a realm of areas where there are things about what you should do that don't have to do with ethics, have to do with etiquette and something like that. But at any rate, so those are competency issues, and we can set those aside. And then you've got the second kind of issue, and that's the one where it's not really, it's a kind of a no-brainer. Did you find any of those where you had no difficulty? You were doing something that had ethical import, but you had major difficulty with it. Now, why did you have major difficulty with it? Well, because you knew it was wrong. And we talked earlier about, if you remember, some of the things we knew were wrong. When our mother said, when you said to your mother, well, everybody's doing it, she said, well, if everybody jumps off a bridge, are you going to do that? Okay, so there are things you know that are wrong. Very, very often, though, they fall into the area of things that I would call temptations. That is, you're just tempted to do something that's wrong. And by the way, we're all tempted to do that. And the good thing to do is to stay away from those temptations. And this is where you get into the area of incentives. Taxes incentivize this, cultures incentivize other stuff, commission structures incentivize stuff, and we'll be taking a look at some of that sort of stuff. But at any rate, there are issues where you know what to do. They're kind of no-brainers. Now, the next one I want to talk about, though, is the dilemma, and those are the really tough ones. And a dilemma is a situation where there are good reasons for doing something and good reasons for not doing it. That is, the action from one point of view is a good one, from another point of view it's a bad one. And it's either conflict of obligations or values or something like that. The problem with the dilemma is you're caught between the horns. And the people in the Middle Ages used to say that, caught between the horns of a dilemma. The solution to a dilemma, if you can manage it, is to get between the horns, come up with a solution, a third possibility that has good reasons both for and against it. But some of them are just tough issues. Okay? Now, that's that section. So we've got these sorts of things. And then the fourth issue, and the fourth kind of issue, is what I want to call systemic. All right? And those systemic issues have to do with larger things. Most of the scenarios have to do with particular instances. Okay, the systemic issues have to do with systems or institutions or stuff like that. And we'll be doing some of that. The system we live in is some sort of capitalism, whether it's crony capitalism or another kind of capitalism. Other systems are socialist systems. Are those any good? We've got institutions like educational institutions. They can get critiqued. Are they being what they should be? What are they for? And that sort of stuff. So those are the four kinds of areas that we want to make judgments about. Okay? And that brings me to basically what kind of thing are these ethical judgments? And I want to suggest that ethical judgments, all right, we've got a couple things going that we want to look at when we look at ethical judgments. What you probably found out with your scenarios is that the more facts you have, the easier it is to make a judgment. You've all been in a situation where you had to make some sort of judgment, or maybe you haven't. But if you have, you've been a manager, you had to fire somebody, everybody didn't think that was a good thing. And you said to yourself, well, if they knew all the facts that I know, they would make the same judgment that I made. Okay, that's the one thing. There are other another element of judgments, and that's the element of values. Ethical values have to do with things that we think are good or desirable or ought to be done or that sort of stuff. And how do they fit in there? So we've got to take a look at these two aspects of judgment, the facts and the values. And, okay. Now, beyond that, okay, when we hit a situation, what I want to suggest is there's an approach we can take to it, okay? And the approach is something like this, okay? First thing, when we look at a case or a situation, we want to figure out what exactly the ethical issue is. Is this a case of whistleblowing? Is it a case of reporting on your colleagues? Is it a case of a bribe? Something like that. We're going to look later on in the course about insider trading to see whether or not that's a problem, what kind of an issue insider trading is. So we want to figure out what the ethical issue is, and we'll see that. Then we want to get facts. That's very, very important, right? Get all the facts. Then we have to determine the stakeholder. Who all is affected by this? All right. It's not just you. It may not just be you and the person immediately. There may be other people affected by this. So those are stakeholders. We're going to be talking about that. And then you want to look for alternative solutions. And when you got all the solutions, 1, 2, 3 possible solutions, then you need to evaluate them. Now, how do you evaluate them? And I'm going to suggest you evaluate them by asking several questions. First question you want to ask is the proposed action legal? Now, that's not the same as ethical, and we will talk in our next session about the difference between legal and ethical. All right, but you don't want to go breaking the law if there's no justifiable reason for breaking the law. Second question to ask is, what is it going to do for you? Is it going to benefit you? Is it going to harm you? And then, of course, we're going to have to look at what benefits and what harms. Third question to ask is going to be, does it benefit others? That's where we're looking at all the other stakeholders, okay, to see exactly how much they get affected. The next question, and this is a really vital question nowadays, is it fair? Is it just? We hear every day in the press, is this fair? Is somebody getting that much money? Is that fair? We'll talk about executive compensation and whether it's fair. We'll talk about distribution and fair taxes and that sort of stuff and how it affects business. And is business being fair to its customers? Okay, so there's that one. Next question, does it meet my commitments? Did I keep my promises? All business rests on trust and promises and that sort of stuff. And we've got to look at whether the proposed solutions to any situation violate one's commitments or not. And then, does it respect others' rights? That's another kind of question. That comes under fairness to a bit, but we've got to take a look at employees' rights and that sort of thing. And then finally, does it preserve my integrity? Lots of people talk about integrity. It's not a very clear concept. We'll try to get that a little bit cleared up. But those will be the questions to ask. Is it legal? Does it benefit me or others? Is it fair? Does it meet my commitments? Does it respect others' rights? And does it preserve my integrity? And you can go to the slides that we provided where we lay these things out. And then finally, I've come up with a kind of handy-dandy way to remember these questions that you need to ask. And I've called it the gift. It shortens the 7 into 4. The first question you want to ask about any kind of activity is how much good. Does it produce good or does it produce harm? Second question you want to ask is, does it preserve my integrity? GI. Okay. A third question is, of course, is it fair? And then finally, right, does it reflect trustworthiness? Is my decision trustworthy? Did it keep my promises? So those are the reasons that we're going to use in trying to make sound moral judgments. We'll talk about all of them more and more as the course goes on.